If you're a fan of open wheel racing, this is an evening you've been waiting for 12 years to happen. More stars, more cars, as one unified body comes together. An end of one era, a beginning of another. 12 years ago, open wheel racing split into two worlds, kart and the Indy Racing League. The best drivers were racing miles apart. But as the 2008 season begins, these drivers race side by side on the same track, unified toward one championship.
What a show these two are putting on. This thing isn't over till it's over.
Tonight at Homestead, a track known for heart-stopping action, drivers who have spent years on ovals race others who have spent most of their careers on road courses. The world's best open-wheel drivers light up the night as one. And under the lights of Homestead Miami Speedway, we welcome you to the 2008 season opener, the first race, the XM Indy 300 at Homestead Miami. We told you about more cars, more stars, 25 in the field tonight, the largest field outside of Indianapolis since the year 2002. And a lot of faces you may not recognize, but we'll introduce you to them as tonight and as the season progresses. Of course, others will be extremely familiar. We welcome you to Firestone Race Day, where we'll get you caught up on what's happened during qualifying last night and also what you can expect to see through the race tonight. And hello again, everybody. It's so glad to be back with you, and you can feel the electricity here at Homestead Miami. It's been an eventful offseason. I mean, after all, Elio Castroneves wins Dancing with the Stars, and of course, you guys do know about Danica and the swimsuit issue, yeah. And there's also this little thing called unification, where everybody's back together under one umbrella. But there's also a story happening from qualifying. The Vision Racing duo of Ed Carpenter and A.J. Foyt IV were supposed to start second and third, respectively. But technical violations after qualifying, they're at the back of the field. That means Danica Patrick's going to move up to the outside of the front row. Let's get more from Jack Arute.
Danica, how will moving up to the front row affect your early drive?
Well, it's definitely going to, leave a clear track for me to get through. This is a difficult track anyway, so put cars in front of you, and it's even more difficult. I think that, it's definitely going to pay off for sure. And I don't know why I'm second, but I'll take it.
And so you guys at home are saying, wait a minute, you just can't talk to Danica without showing us the swimsuit issue, right? Well, okay, guys. Now, I know you're not listening to my voice from this point forward, but try, because while she was doing the swimsuit issue, of course, Elio Castroneves was doing his best at Dancing with the Stars. 36 million people watched him win with Julianne Hough in that final. Well, let's get more with the man who's now affectionately known as Twinkle Toes from Brienne Pettigo.
Well, he's no longer doing the quick step on the dance floor, but I think he'll be pretty quick out on the racetrack today. Elio, being crowned champion of Dancing with the Stars certainly gave you some serious publicity during the off-season. How has that extra celebrity changed your life?
It's great. I hope my race will be like a foxtrot, very smooth, but it was great. I mean, not only myself, but obviously, Danica, now with the merge. You can see that this thing is getting better and better. So I'm so happy that everything start happening this season. So I always say it's a new beginning of open wheel series. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fast. I'm ready, man. I think you guys saw that I'm ready. Huh?
After being just a splash of fuel away from winning the 2007 championship, Scott Dixon starts the 2008 season on the pole here tonight at Miami Homestead Speedway. 8 racers that are rookies in this field today. A lot of guys have not run on an oval before. As the pole sitter, you're going to get to them quickly. How do you handle that traffic?
Well, it's going to be kind of one of those things. You're just going to have to decide once you get on it. But, there's a lot of guys out there that haven't maybe raced on an oval, but they've done a lot of racing. They're very competent, and they're going to put on a good show. But the thing that we've got to be proud of tonight is the unification. All the people that we got out here, you can feel the buzz around you. It's definitely taking off. But I think the guy to watch on the first few laps is going to be my teammate, man. That's going to be pretty impressive from back there. And I know Chip's been trying to calm him down a little bit so he doesn't go too crazy, but it's going to be a good race. Yeah,
Target Ganassi drivers bookending the field here tonight with Scott Dixon heading up and Dan Weldon coming from the back. Dixon won this race in 2003. He'll try to do it again tonight, Marty.
And when he did that, it was his first IndyCar start back in 2003. Let's talk a little bit more about unification with our expert analyst, Scott Goodyear. This is not going to be instant gratification. It's a building process.
It certainly is. And before the split back in 1996, open wheel racing was the place that all young drivers wanted to go. That was their destination. Well, in the last 12 years, it's actually become NASCAR. That's where you're finding a lot of these young drivers gravitating towards NASCAR because that's where the salaries are, that's where the sponsors are, that's where the teams are hiring. Well, I think starting tonight with this unification, I think this is going to put open wheel racing back on the map and back in the destination list of a lot of these young drivers.
More stars and more cars, and we started off in just a matter of a few moments. We're going to step aside just for a moment, and we'll talk about Dan Weldon. This is what happened to him in qualifying. Remember, he's going for 4 wins in a row here at Homestead, Miami. Will he be able to do it? He'll have to start from the back, and we'll talk to him when we come back. Stay with us.
Unbelievable finish as Dan Weldon brings it home and delivers for the Andretti Green Team.
Who's going to win it? Weldon on the outside at the stripe. It is Weldon.
Weldon won it by 14,000 of a second. Dan Weldon picks up the win.
Start from 9th to 2nd. It'll be his 3rd consecutive win here at Homestead, Miami.
Excellent job, boys. Excellent job.
To score the 4-peat tonight, though, guys, he's going to have to start in the back of the pack because of a problem during qualifications last night. The car steps out, and all of a sudden, Dan Weldon finds himself getting a concrete encounter here at Miami Homestead Speedway. For Dan Weldon, though, it's an opportunity that will not go unnoticed. Dan, you'll find yourself in the back of the pack. Where do you want to be after lap 10 tonight?
Well, under the boss's instructions, I'm not allowed to be the usual Dan. I have to take it very slow and very patiently, and that's what I do. I obviously got to thank everybody on the number 9 car and the number 10 car for working together to get me back out in the spare car with the Honda engine in. But we definitely had a very fast race car yesterday, and I'm sure with the way the guys have put this one together, it's going to be good too. So we'll just take it one step at a time, but I would hope to be up the front relatively quickly.
Well, the bad news for Dan is that the farthest back anybody has started this race and won is 12th. That was his teammate Scott Dixon back in 2003. Can he do it, especially with all this young traffic out there?
I think he can. Dan is a very dominating driver, and he's very forceful when he goes through traffic, and I think that's why Chip Ganassi hired him. But something? Tonight is a whole different race than it's been here any other time, and the most important thing is to have patience. And when Chip Ganassi tells one of his drivers, hey, you can go a little bit slower, that's usually not Chip. So I think he understands how different it is here tonight. A lot of first-time starters here at Homestead this time, and a lot of first-time oval drivers. That's going to be important.
Let's show you a graphic that'll bear that point out. Take a look. The top 4 on this list have never been on an oval in a race until tonight. And there you can see Will Power, Justin Wilson. And don't expect a lot. We're not putting any pressure on these guys. They just need to finish this race.
They said if they roll it on the trailer, for them, that will be successful, and that's what they're looking for. 11 drivers here tonight, Marty. This is our first start here at Homestead.
Well, guess what? It's time to get it all going. Let's go trackside for those 4 famous words in motorsports. Whew, I'm excited. Hope you are too.
Race fans, are you ready? The time is now for the most famous words in motorsports. Please welcome back for the command, 3 doors down.
Drivers, start your engines!
you see the look in some of those eyes? 25 engines come to life here at Homestead Miami Speedway. And in a moment, this new era of open wheel racing will officially begin. Take a look at our XM starting grid across the top of your screen, and we would have been talking and touting the great run by Ed Carpenter and AJ Foyt IV, because they should have been second and third, but as you've already heard, they are at the back of the field. So they will be at the tail end of this 25-car pack along with Dan Weldon. So that is going to be very interesting to see how he can work his way up and how those two can work their way through this field. There's an example of our 360-degree onboard camera. First time it's ever been used in any form of motorsports. We won't make you this dizzy during the race, we promise, but it gives us some great shots, and there's exactly what it looks like on top of the car, and it's actually much smaller than last year's unit, which had a big old wing to it, and that is very compact. And there they go, rolling out onto the track. Let's take a look at our 6 onboard cameras in high definition. The whole season will be in HD, and boy, it is crisp and clear. Justin Wilson, one of the transition drivers coming over from Champ Car. Elio Castroneves, Danica Patrick, Scott Dixon, Dan Weldon in the back. That's going to be fun. And Tony Kanaan. That is our starting grid across the top. You've seen it once. If you notice, Graham Rahal is not in the field. The 19-year-old is right up there on top of the press box. There he is. He had an unfortunate crash standing next to Dad Bobby. There he is. He's going to be taking care of his team, but he's up there to learn. The car stepped out on him. He hit the wall in turn 2 in Tuesday. They didn't have enough parts to get going, so he will be racing next week at St. Petersburg. Let's get our final stories from pit road first. And Vince, what's up?
Well, Marty, of the teams that are making the transition from Champ Car to the IndyCar Series, Frank Pereira of Conquest Racing qualified best, 15th fastest on the speed chart. 8 teams have come over representing 8 drivers here in this field tonight, many of whom have never raced on an oval. To a man, they say the goal is simply to finish the race, load the car up on one piece, learn everything you can learn, and call it a victory. Brianne Pedigo?
Well, for a driver, there's very few things that are more frustrating than being sent to the back of the pack. And for Vision Racing, said Carpenter and AJ Foyt IV, that's exactly what happened. It's not just frustration that's going to be pushing them forward, though. It's a feeling of they've got something to prove now. But Larry Curry told me just before he came out to the grid, Tony Stewart sent him a text message, said, Larry, it's always more fun to come from the back. Jack?
Well, Brianne, the off-season's been filled with a lot of things away from the racetrack. For Marco Andretti, it was turning 21, but he says it's the longest off-season. Why? Because finally last year, if you remember right here, some 20 minutes into the race here, the car went away and it said it almost killed him. That just started a sophomore season that was pathetic. Marco Andretti said, I couldn't wait to get back in the cockpit here and get rid of that 600-pound gorilla. He says, I'm no longer a sophomore. I want to go racing, guys.
All right, thanks, Jack. Brianne mentioned the text message that the team got from Tony. We got a message from Rusty Wallace. He's watching up at Daytona. He says, I wish I was there. I want to see 25 cars at one time. Glad to have you on board, Rusty. Let's talk about the race analysis.
Well, rookies are going to be the big thing on everybody's mind here this evening, certainly because we have 8 of them. And like we said, a lot of them without any oval experience or racing here at night. Fuel strategy, well, Honda's given back the adjustable fuel trim to the teams, 5 different positions, and then they have an opportunity to run under green or yellow or 3 different lean settings. And last lap, last turn, guys, it always comes down to that here at Homestead Miami. Set your car up for that last lap because it's going to be exciting.
On the right is Dan Weldon. He'll be starting way back in the back. You can see the pace car has peeled off. Get ready, folks. The new era is coming out of turn 4, and the IndyCar Series for 2008 is green. No, they waved it off. They waved it off.
And I think, Marty, because the field really here is broken up, you've got a big group of cars going in through turns 1 and 2, and then we have a lot of cars straggling in the back section, and the president of the league, Brian Barnhart, really doesn't like to have cars spread out like that because it really can make a slingshot effect for the cars in the back of the field. He wants to see them all bunched up about 55 to 70 feet between the rolls, nice and neat. The pace setter, Scott Dixon, has to bring them up to the front here. All has to be smooth. Dixon has to be the first one across the line.
Dixon picking up the pace again, coming through turn 4. Danica Patrick a little slow on the throttle as we come down towards the start. Will we go green? We are green at Homestead, Miami.
You have Dan Weldon on the right-hand side of your screen now. Remember, he started at the back because of a qualification crash. Watch him just continue to work the high side, put his experience to use.
Everybody makes it clean through turn 1 and 2. You see all the sparking. That's from the full fuel loads. You get a face full of sparks if you're trailing. Look at Dan Weldon picking them off. End of lap 1. It's Scott Dixon, Danica Patrick, Tony Kanaan, Marco Andretti, and Ryan Briscoe, your top 5. But look at Weldon. He is charging through the field. He is up to 19th already.
This is what we say, pardon me, excuse me, I'm coming through. Now, all these drivers know he started in the back of the field, so they will hear from their spotters and also be looking in their mirrors knowing that he is on his way. Dan is the man of the moment now.
So much for paces. He is already up to 16th, picked up 3 more spots. Look at Weldon over on the right, coming up on Oriol Servia. There you can see Weldon from both angles. Jack, you've got more?
Yeah, this run from the back is contrary to what Chip Ganassi had counseled his driver. You heard Dan Weldon tell me before the start of the race that he and his car owner had huddled. Ganassi told me he talked to his driver over and over again and said, we have a car that is capable of winning, but you don't need to go to the front right away. Weldon argued that with these newcomers, he needed to get by them as quickly as possible. Ganassi has been watching on board the camera, and he hasn't smiled yet.
And we've got a battle for the lead now. Tony Kanaan had gotten around Danica Patrick about a lap and a half ago, and here we go side by side, about 3 inches apart. Dixon holds on to the lead, but Tony wants it.
You and I both jumped at the same time there, Marty. They almost rubbed wheels at 210 miles an hour.
Well, and Danica and Marco are having their own battle back for 3rd place behind all this.
Remember, this is a fight against teams right now. Target Chip Ganassi up in the front with Scott Dixon and Andretti Green Racing with Tony Kanaan. And this is really Tony Kanaan's hometown race now, Marty, because he lives close by in Miami.
Take a look at this wheel-to-wheel action. This brings back memories of 2 years ago when it was the last 10 laps, when it was Weldon holding off Helio Castroneves. We're already just early in this thing.
Well, not only I'm thinking of that, but as a previous driver, I'm thinking about the first race of the season. You want to get some cobwebs off because you've not raced since September. But these guys will have none of that because they're going back to last year's form already.
You can see the battle shaping up behind these two. Tony has sort of fallen back into place now, about a car length and a half behind Scott Dixon. We're making these laps at 210 miles an hour. Remember, the pole speed was 213.
Now what Tony will do will sit back and sort of watch Scott Dixon's car as we see the race right now going on for 3rd place. Ryan Briscoe in the Penske machine and Marco Andretti in the 26.
And if you're saying what happened to Danica Patrick, she has fallen back to 6th place. Helio Castroneves has gotten around Danica as well.
Now remember, Briscoe is his first race in the IndyCar for team owner Roger Penske, as he's now trying to have a look at what's going on here. Remember, Sam Hornish won in his debut here for Roger Penske back in 2004.
Down the backstretch, Tony Kanaan's going to take another look to the outside. You're on board. Not going to get it done.
Seems like he's got a little understeer mid-turn. You can see him really dial a lot of steering into the steering wheel, and the car seems to lose some RPM. It just sounds like it starts to burn some speed off in mid-turn, as we call it.
That white car you saw coming out of pit lane was Jay Howard. He had made an unscheduled stop. He had a crash yesterday in qualifying, bruised his knees very badly. They did get the car back together. He did start the race, but obviously had to go in for an adjustment. He is 2 laps down. Take a look now as we get back to Dan Weldon. Guess what, folks? It's taken him 11 laps to get up into the 10th position. This reminds me of last year when he was, what, 9? Picked up 9 places in about 4 laps.
Very dominating performance last year, as we mentioned earlier. And you know something? A very driven driver, very focused, and all he wants to do is get up to the front. He can see that, he can taste it, he can smell it. That's where he wants to be. Jack LaRoute, you have more?
Yes, Scott. In fact, throughout the course of practice, the one thing that this team worked on, they said it was the key to their last success last year, was to be able to run flat out. Dan Weldon and his team and the engineers have worked to do just that. They said they might not be as fast as they wanted, but they wanted to be able to do that in traffic. Meanwhile, up front, we've got a nifty battle, guys, with his teammate.
It is Tony Kanaan sticking his nose in front of the number 9 of Scott Dixon, but here comes Dixon right back.
Not for very long. It looks like Dixon's car works a little bit in the middle of the turns at Tony, but Tony got the run off.
Look at that! Going around lap traffic there. It looked like it might have been Frank Pereira's car. No, Mario Moraes. That was Mario Moraes that just went a lap down. And they are flying. They're running at 209. Mario is at about 193. That's why he got the lap pretty quickly there. All right, so we're going to set things up for you here. It's Tony Kanaan, Scott Dixon, Marco Andretti's in third, Helio Castroneves is now fourth, and Ryan Briscoe rounds out your top 5 after 13 exciting laps here at the XM Indy 300. And Dan Weldon, well, he is working his way up through the field. He's now up to 9th. We're going to go side by side. You won't miss a thing. ESPN's presentation of the XM Indy 300 at Homestead, Miami, brought to you by XM Radio with Indy Racing. Exclusive coverage from the wheels up. By Firestone, the first name in Indy Racing. And by ethanol, fueling America's future. Back here at Homestead Miami Speedway, as you see downtown Miami, that's actually looked more like Miami Beach. And there is Buddy Rice as he has moved up to the 11th position right now. We're under caution. He's missing a mirror, and that's probably the reason we have the caution, because that's the piece of debris out on the track. We should update you that Tony Kanaan, you saw it in Side by Side, the only motorsport series that gives you that luxury. You didn't miss it, that Tony went around Scott Dixon to take the lead. We've had our first lead change there. And we can also update you, Dan Weldon is running 9th. Ed Carpenter, who started back in 24th, is now running 10th. And his teammate A.J. Foyt IV, who started 25th, is up to 12th. So those 3 guys are all on the move. And as the Firestone and the Honda pace car makes its way around, there is the number 9 of Scott Dixon. That is lap traffic in front of him. That's Ernesto Vizo, one of our transition drivers coming over from Champ Car. He's just been put 1 lap down. He's in 21st position, and then as we swing all the way around, you can see the cars behind him. Hearing the word, the pit lane is open, so we're going to have some takers here early, as it looks like everybody on lap number 19 is going to bring everybody in. So let's get set up for our ethanol triple pits, and Jack Root, they're going to be coming your way first.
60-mile-an-hour speed limit, led by Tony Kanaan, coming down off of the pit road lane and onto pit road they come. Scott Dixon directly, as you see, on board with getting ready for this pit stop. They're all the way, guys, down the end of this long pit road. It looks like feeding time at the zoo right now. On the top of the screen, Tony Kanaan. In the middle, Scott Dixon and Marco Andretti. Andretti likes his car thus far. Kanaan, it looks like all 3 will be nominal pit stops. It'll be a case of who'll be able to get the work done, be able to drop the hammer to take the lead back. It's going to be, looks like yes, indeed. It was a drag race, guys. Back out onto the pit, off the pit road.
And we've got one car that has stalled coming down pit road. And trying to find out who it is. It is the 27 of Hideki Muto. And Muto missed his pit, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get it fired. As back out on the track, it is Scott Dixon taking the race lead again over Tony Kanaan. So we'll step aside, side by side, as we continue under our first yellow. First caution continues here at Homestead Miami Speedway with Scott Dixon in front of Tony Kanaan, Helio Castroneves, Ryan Briscoe, and Marco Andretti. That's your top 5. You know, while we've got a moment, let's get the opinions of the drivers on what this unification of both open wheel series means to them.
The good news about the merge now, Now I'm not the oldest driver in the series, so I'm so happy.
If you would ask me, it should have happened a while back. It never should have split.
I think there's definitely going to be a transition period in the beginning where it's going to be a little messy.
It's more difficult and complicated for us than for IndyCar drivers.
We all gonna have to work, including the drivers.
Make those top 10s, top 15s, top 5s even more prestigious.
That's the greatest thing about it now. You know, you can say I do IndyCar, and that's the only one series.
And there is Tony George, the head man of the Indy Racing League, and doing double duty because obviously he is the owner of Vision Racing, and you're saying, well, obviously there's no favoritism because it was the 2 Vision cars that were penalized for the infractions in qualifying that went to the back of the pack. All right, and there is one of them on the left. That's Ed Carpenter in the Menards, number 20. And after pit stops, he is up to 8th right now as we are getting ready, apparently, to go back to green flag racing here at Homestead, Miami. It'll be Scott Dixon, Tony Kanaan, Elio Castroneves, his teammate Ryan Briscoe, Marco Andretti, then Ryan Hunter-Reay is up to 6th, Danica Patrick is 7th, and we're back to green. Got a lot of sparks from one car, and it looks like maybe a tire going down. I don't know, Scott.
It looks like Will Power possibly because the car is actually just dragging itself on the ground. Justin Wilson right now, the 02 that you're on board with, is looking at the car to the right now. With both those cars being so slow, maybe they touched on the restart. We'll have to get a report on that.
I think there may have been some contact as you can see now Scott Dixon is in front of Elio Castroneves, Tony Kanaan. Danica Patrick is on the move. She has gotten around Marco Andretti up to 6th. Ryan Hunter-Reay has also gotten around Marco, so he's dropped 2 positions.
Well, her car is working because she's able to keep it on the low side and keep her foot on the gas. This, as a driver, you're hoping that they made the great changes for it, either with wing adjustments or tire pressure, to get the car working as quickly as you want it to. Now, when she drives along, if she's got understeer, she'll turn that wheel so much she'll scrub speed off down the middle of the turn, but we'll have to see if the car is going to work better for her as the laps continue here.
Take a look as they come down the backstretch. Here comes Marco trying to make it 3 wide. Let's get an update from Vince Welch in the pits.
Yeah, the 02 car of Justin Wilson had suffered a flat right rear, so he had to come in. That might have caused the tangle up with Will Power. They changed it, and off he goes.
And we're getting word that Will Power is also in pit lane, and it looks like his night is already over. So a tough break for Will Power in his debut in the IndyCar Series season opener. So Danica Patrick right now in 5th. And let's get an update from Jack Arute.
From the drop of the green flag, guys, Danica Patrick has been complaining of understeer. They made a tire pressure adjustment and tried to make a slight wing adjustment to see if it would get any better. Keep in mind that all the practice and preparation for this race was done in the heat of the day. There were no night practices, so this has been a shot in the dark as Danica Patrick works over her teammate, number 26. That, of course, is Marco Andretti. He also made a wing adjustment, and he was complaining of understeer as well.
And guess who is right behind Danica Patrick? The number 10 of Dan Weldon. That's right. He has worked his way up to 7th. He's lapping faster than anybody else, 211.8 miles an hour. And here he comes on the outside of Danica.
And you know there's no love lost between Danica Patrick and Dan Weldon. They've had their spats before, both on and off the racetrack. She knows she can't do anything about it. Dan's just too fast. She goes by, and that's going to be one mad Danica Patrick inside that cockpit, Marty.
So Weldon up to 6th. Here we are working lap 31 of 200, and who knows, maybe Weldon may rewrite the history books yet tonight here at Homestead Miami Speedway.
He is on the move, and you saw Danica and also Marco Andretti making Dan Weldon go high to go around the high side the longest way and maybe push him up into the gray throughout the turn. But he just seems to be able to take that on and continue moving forward.
Meanwhile, Scott Dixon continues to lead over Elio Castroneves. The margin is 0.3 of a second. That's what it looks like on the racetrack. Back to 3rd is Tony Kanaan. Here comes Weldon looking to the outside again, and Marco makes that car pretty wide.
He moves it up, but he's also moving because traffic's just further up in front of him. And that's the thing that you have to watch when you're doing all this lapping that we talk about. Enrique Bernaldi was actually on the low side, so he had to move up the racetrack.
We told you that Will Power is out of the race. Vince Welch is caught up with him.
Will, exactly what happened there on the track?
I think I hit Wilson's back wheel and bent my front suspension. Sort of disappointing for the Aussie Vineyards number 8 to finish this early, but
Indy, what was your impression of the short time out in the racing?
Oh yeah, I was enjoying it. It was a lot of fun, and we were sort of just taking our time and learning about following cars, and yeah, I mean, we just had a little understand, but it was fun.
Marty?
All right, and we'll see Will on the road course, the street course at St. Petersburg next Sunday, and guarantee you all those transition guys coming over, they have a lot of experience. As we should tell you, while this is going on, Hideki Muto has gone back into pit lane, so the rookie has got some more troubles. Meanwhile, as we look further back, let's check in on Ed Carpenter. He is there, and it's not hard to miss. I mean, that bright Menards yellow. Ed will be running those colors. He's in 9th place right now. His teammate, A.J. Foyt, the 4th, is in 10th. Let's get an update from Brianne Pettigo.
Marty, a lot of off-season homework is really paying off for this mission team. They spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel, a lot of time doing research and development, and it's already proven helpful for Ed Carpenter, who's moved up because of a pit stop, that the crew has all been enrolled in the Pit Fit program. They're all working out in the gym. This team is really benefiting from doing their off-season homework.
All right, thank you, Brienne. Let's take a look at the biggest movers. Weldon from 22nd up to 6th. He's got 16 spots. Carpenter and Foyt, 15 spots each, as they are now 9th and 10th. Says a lot for those teams.
Ed Foyt just went around his teammate Ed Carpenter. As you were mentioning that, it seems like Ed Carpenter's car is starting to fall off the speed category just a little bit as the 4 Vitor Mirror now goes underneath him. And certainly he's got to make some adjustments, either the next pit stop or maybe some adjustments inside the cockpit, Marty, with some tools that he has to improve that car.
As you take a look at our race leader, Scott Dixon, his lead is about 2-3 car lengths, but we've got a report that there may have been a little contact between Tony Kanaan and Helio Castroneves. Let's take a look.
Tony Kanaan on the high side, the number 11 car. She's riding along now with Helio Castroneves on the low side. And look at this. They both want the same piece of real estate. They're marking it. Yes.
Oh, that could have been
man, at 210 miles an hour. They won't want to do that very often.
Woo! That will stop your heart. And that's at over 210 miles an hour. And whoa, Dixon was under attack by Helio all of a sudden. I think the lap traffic may have slowed him up for a moment, opening the door, but Helio was not able to get the job done. We're working lap 39 of 200. Scott Dixon's got his hands full. Helio Castroneves is back there lurking, as is Tony Kanaan, Ryan Briscoe, and Marco Andretti, with Dan Weldon now running in 6th. We're going to step aside. You'll go side by side. While the action continues here, let's talk about opening night of Major League Baseball Sunday night on ESPN. The Atlanta Braves take on the Washington Nationals. First game ever at Nationals Park. Opening night baseball built by the Home Depot on ESPN tomorrow night at 8 Eastern. All right, let's get you caught up. Scott Dixon still in the race lead by a second now over Helio Castroneves, but while we were side by side, you saw Dan Weldon get around Ryan Briscoe. He is now in the top 5 here on lap 45. Let's get more from Jack Arute.
Marty, as you know, there's no lack of confidence when it comes to Dan Weldon. Before the car rolled off the tech sled today, he went to each and every member of his crew. He thanked them for their support and for their hard work overnight. He told them, my only hope is that I can pay you back tonight with a run to the front. Brianne, it looks like that's what he's doing right now.
Well, Ed Carpenter is struggling right now in turns 3 and 4. Earlier he was complaining of an understeer. That's becoming more apparent in the car in turns 3 and 4. That's not the only problem. He says his tires are in desperate need of changing. He said he can make it, but it won't be pretty.
Well, he has dropped now down to 12th, so after being as high as 9th place, he finds himself falling back, as you described, because of the tire situation.
And when the tires start to go off, it's simply from the fact that they're losing their adhesion, they're losing their grip. Firestone Firehawks are great tires, but if you've used them or abused them just a little bit too hard because the car handling might not be good, then they start to lose their adhesion, or what they call the prime part of the adhesion, Marty, and you just start to lose maybe about 2 miles an hour.
But that was only 28 laps ago when he came in for the stop, so obviously something is going on there. We'll see if it rears its ugly head with anybody else out there. Meanwhile, let's check in once again with our race leader, Scott Dixon, because now he's starting to open the gap. It's up to 1.6 seconds over Helio Castroneves. as the run's starting to slow down now. He's running at 209. Remember when they first came out with those fresh tires, they were up around 211.
Well, what he notices now is that his car is better on long runs. When the tires get warm, they get hot, the fuel starts to deplete in the fuel tank, and the car starts to get a little bit lighter. So this is something to watch for close to the end of the race. If it's a long run, he knows his car can be very strong. How will it be on a restart? That remains to be seen, and that's what drivers look for. Restarts, how's the car working? Long runs, how the car working? The other guys like Elio has to report back and say, hey, this is what's going on with my race car. Once I get 10 or 15 laps on it, what can you do to help me? Help me with tire pressures, help me with wing angles. The engineers are busy working in the pit lane right now trying to figure that out for them.
Well, we should also update you, Bruno Junqueira, who has raced 4 times at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the 500. He is out of his race car for Dale Coyne Racing, listed in 23rd place. They have pulled that car behind the wall. So we have 3 cars in the pits or behind the wall right now. 25 vehicles started this race tonight. A lot more drivers out there, a lot more people that may not be familiar with. So we asked Tony Kanaan, Danica Patrick, what's it going to be like out there with all that traffic?
The challenges with more cars are just that there are usually, well, more accidents. There is more lap traffic. There's more unexpected things that happen. And you know, with more cars, you tend to have different experience levels within.
I think it's going to change the way we set up our cars for the race, because you're probably going to be lapping more cars. You have more disturbance in the air, even if you're not lapping the cars, because you have more motion around the oval, especially on the oval.
What do you think? What's the transition
I think
like?
the biggest thing for all these drivers here today, it's obviously the speed, it's the high banks that they have to run at, it's the constant pounding at 210 miles an hour, the mental, physical conditioning they have to have for that. But the biggest thing I think also that we haven't spoke about is that all the RL drivers that have been doing this for years are used to having somebody speak in their ear, the spotters that are up in the grandstands. Well, all these drivers that are coming over here now have to go out there and drive the race car and start to get used to the spotter telling them someone's looking high, someone's looking low, clear on the high side, and it's very draining for you when you go and do it for the very first time.
There you see Marco Andretti dueling with his teammate Tony Kanaan. Marco gets around him. That will be for 3rd position. While all this is going on, Vince Welch has caught up with Bruno Junqueira.
Bruno Junqueira just wanted to have a good, balanced race car tonight to finish, but you're not able to do so. What was the problem?
The car after 10 laps got really loose, so I couldn't drive. We stopped, we make a change, but still way loose, and I'm just getting lapped all the time. And it's very easy to crash, and I mean, I'm being a traffic for everybody in the race. So I think it's better to stop. The team, Z-Line team, did a good job to put the car together for the race, but they're not ready yet. It's going to be better in St. Pete.
Marty?
Well, and that's what we talked about at the beginning here. Every one of these teams wanted to put these cars back on the trailer in one piece because they have no backup, they have no spares. They crash here, it's like Graham Rahal. You're done until the next race, until you get it fixed.
You know, you talked about a loose race car. That's when the back end wants to swap around on you, which is exactly what happened to Dan Weldon in the qualifying run. So a very smart driver, very experienced driver. He knows when to bring it into the pit lane and just say, that's the day.
Take a look at Marco Andretti in the 26 car. He is trying to move around and does get around. Elio Castroneves is now up to 2nd place, and that means only Scott Dixon is left for him to go after, and there he is. You can see Scott with the 2-lap vehicles on the high side. Dixon is down low, as is Marco Andretti. And as you see all the cars fly by the finish line, there is your top 5 after 56 of 200 laps. We're going to go side by side, and Scott Dixon in control so far as he has led 49 of those laps so far. Does he win his 2nd race ever here at Homestead, Miami?
Dixon is the leader right now. If he wins the race, he wins the title.
We're back to green flag racing.
2 laps, 3 miles remain here at Chicagoland Speedway. White flag will be displayed, the final lap of the 2007 season.
The championship at stake.
Dixon by a half a car length. Dario swings it wide.
Dixon is out of fuel. Dario Franchitti's going to win the race and the championship.
Yeah! Scott Dixon runs out of fuel on the final lap of the race.
And Scott Dixon's got his hands full with traffic, and that's Marco Andretti on the high side in the 26, going to try and take the lead from him. Here comes more lap traffic. You're on board with Dixon. The man who finished second in the championship chase last year, he just needed about a glass full of ethanol to make it finish in front, or he just needed the race to be one lap shorter.
Marty, we just saw a very mature Marco Andretti at the 65, 66 lap of this race make a very smart decision, get out of the throttle because he was getting pinched down from the traffic up above, and just follow in behind Scott Dixon. Maybe a couple of years ago you wouldn't have seen that. He would have pushed the issue, tried to make it 3 wide, but he realizes that it's got to be all the way to 200 laps, 300 miles here, which is that move that will give him the victory.
Well, you got to remember that this is his 3rd trip here to Homestead, Miami, and he has yet to finish at this racetrack. Last year the car was so unmanageable, he parked it. Let's take a look at our Firestone lap leaders. 2 guys have led. Scott Dixon has been the majority of those for 59, and Tony Kanaan has led for 8. Let's get more on Jackaroo.
Well, Scott Dixon has been warned about Marco Andretti for the last 15 laps, all the way when Marco was running in the 4th position. Now, what has changed for Marco Andretti from that disastrous sophomore season? Well, how about his crew chief, the man that calls the tactics? Ziggy Hargis has been hired by Andretti Green Racing. Ziggy, who is an Indy 500 champion in his own right with Al Unser Jr., has come over to the team for the first time. He's calling the shots for the young Andretti, who, by the way, scored his 21st birthday just 1 week ago. They're looking out for Marco Andretti, target Chip Ganassi Racing. Meanwhile, his teammate, Tony Kanaan, is coming down on the pit road. He'll be the first of the Andretti Green cars to make a pit stop. He ran well in the early going, but then faded back. All of the cars have been battling with a slight understeer. They've been adding wing. Let's see if Tony Kanaan will do that when he comes in to take on the fuel, the ethanol, and the Firestone Firehawk tire. A wing adjustment is made. Still trying to put more grip on the front. Meanwhile, up front, there's a battle for the lead, guys.
It certainly is, but Marco Andretti's going to peel off from that battle for the lead because he needs to come in. Remember, we talked about the pit window. Tony made it 50 laps. Marco's made it 51 since his last stop. Looks like his teammate, Hideki Muto, is a little slower coming into pit lane. This could cost him dearly.
Well, the 4 car is directly in front of Marco Andretti right now, Vitor Mir, and Vitor didn't seem to come in off the pit entrance lane as quick as maybe he could have. What could have slowed maybe a second or 2 for Marco Andretti. Let's watch Marco stop now, see if there's going to be any wing changes up the front.
Jack?
They made a major wing adjustment the last time, Scott. They're not going to make that adjustment this time. Marco Andretti was in a big hurry. He was told to hold in his pit box, and he did not. There is a perfect example of problems. Meanwhile, Scott Dixon is pulling down your leader. Danica Patrick is in as well, making a major wing adjustment. So far for Scott Dixon, nothing has been required. It's been nominal all the way. The fuel man goes to work. As our 360 camera shows, the clock is ticking away. These green flag pit stops will make the difference. A 9.2 second stop. Let's go to Brianne Pedigo for more.
Not a change was made to the number 3 car. He is very happy and back out in 3rd place. Jack?
Meanwhile, Dan Weldon will pull his car down on the pit road for service. Weldon has showed an awful lot of patience, guys. Not a lot of talk from Chip Ganassi trying to counsel his driver. I guess that talk was done before Weldon got in the cockpit of the race car. They make a wing adjustment, look like about a full turn of front wing. All these cars are battling some grip issues down into the corners. Weldon is off and away.
All right, so the pit cycle is just about complete, and it looks like when everything comes around, there's going to be your battle for the race lead. It will be Scott Dixon trying to hold off young Marco Andretti. And when you got those fresh tires and the full load, whoa, pushes up. Marco on the high side, and he's going to get the lead because Dixon had to lift.
Dixon had so much understeer. You saw him fighting the wheel going into turn 3. Heard him get out of the throttle because he knew the front was going to push up. Now the spotter, Marty, would have told him that Andretti is looking high. Andretti is looking high. He knew he had to get out of the throttle big time. Otherwise, he would have collected both of them going into the wall.
Well, Marco Andretti is about to lead his first lap in 3 years here at Homestead, Miami.
And just as you said that, Scott Dixon had a bit of a wiggle going through the turn there. So let's watch to see if maybe they made some changes on his car. And right now, it's not really agreeing with what he needs for him.
Let's go back and show you this pass one more time.
Now you see Dixon got a big wiggle there already. That's what slowed him up, and Marco just squeezes through. He's all the way up to the wall in the gray area. Not much grip up there, guys. There was almost a huge collision. Watch this, a little wiggle, not leaving much room for Marco Andretti, and just gets through there in fine Andretti fashion.
Got away with one there. Marco Andretti. How bad a year was it last year? 17 drivers ran all 17 races. That guy right there completed the least amount of laps, only 72% of them. He had 10 DNFs, including 6 crashes. He's in front right now. Well, don't forget to tune in next Sunday for the IndyCar Series. The Honda Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, that's right, will be on the street course. It's next Sunday, 2:30 Eastern. For more, just log on to ESPN.com. And a lot of our transition drivers coming over will be running strong there because they're used to running on the street courses and the road courses from the Champ Car days. Take a look at Marco Andretti, the youngster, in front of Scott Dixon by about 0.7 of a second right now.
Nope.
And Jack, have you been able to figure out what Dixon's issues were a few laps ago when he lost the lead?
Actually, Marty, no major issues other than just wanting to be a bit conservative. I asked my colleague if there were any major concerns or problems with the car. He said no, and then he pointed to the number of laps that were left in the race. One thing I've learned by covering my colt for almost 2 decades, he doesn't really care about the middle of the race. What he tries to do is build his book so that they are the best at the end of the race. One thing, Scott Goodyear, you should know is they've begun to take advantage of that new Honda addition this season of being able to change their fuel mixture. They've been back and forth between fuel mixture 2 and fuel mixture 3. That is Scott Dixon all evening. Could they be making some fuel for a run at the end? I don't know.
Well, Jack, I have to laugh because it's just like management to say there was really no issues or no concerns when the driver's out there at 210 miles an hour with the car twitching underneath them. So for a driver, that's a bit of a moment or a bit of a concern. For management, well, maybe that's not, Marty.
You saw the numbers on Ryan Hunter-Reay right now running in 7th position. Let's get an update on the Ray Hell Letterman racer from Vince Welch.
He has Ryan Briscoe of Penske in front of him and Danica Patrick of AGR behind. Those are the 3 players battling for this position. But Ryan Hunter-Reay has been happy with the car. They made a front wing adjustment on the last stop, and he's really good on the long runs, which should pay him off at the end of the fuel window. Jack?
Well, Vince, Danica Patrick may have found herself on the front row with the problems during post-race, post-qualifying tech inspection, but now she finds herself still battling a car with heavy understeer. Now, calling the race tonight for Danica is Michael Andretti himself. They have added wing, continue to add wing. I just asked Michael, has it cured the problem? He shrugged his shoulders and said, no, we're still chasing a severe understeer problem for Danica.
Well, Danica right now in 8th is about 13.5 seconds behind the race lead. There is Michael Andretti, team owner of Andretti Green Racing. And let's go back a little bit earlier in the race. We did manage to capture some of the radio conversation.
Tires are going off. I got loose in 3 and 4. Okay, work your tools back. Take the bump out of that right rear. This is really bad. Yeah, I know. You got to give me some more laps. You're doing fine here. We're only 9 seconds behind the leader. We're going to leave no front wing. We're just going to do a tire pressure adjustment. Maybe a half a turn of front wing. Copy that. Half turn front.
Well, the interesting is we hear Kyle Moyer right there starting to speak with the driver. The most important thing I think I've watched here this weekend is that there's a different line going around Homestead Miami Speedway this weekend, Marty, because last year all cars wanted to be on the low side, were comfortable driving on the low side. It seems like the racing line this year is mid-track or even a little bit higher. Now, the tires are a little bit different here this year. We got new left side tires with the same tires that we used here last year on the right-hand side. A little bit different sidewall construction on all of them, and maybe the teams really haven't figured out these tires as of yet.
That's Mom Bev watching the monitor down in pit lane as her daughter continues to rotate around the track at 207 miles an hour. She went past the 23 of Milka Dunno, who's running in 15th. And now we switch our attention up to the battle for 4th. Elio Castroneves in the Team Penske machine in front of Tony Kanaan as those two are starting to get a little bit closer. That's Oriol Servia in the 5 that they're going around, and Is that kind of some moisture that we may have seen there for a bit, or did the fog roll in all of a sudden?
Either way, if that's what the driver's seeing, he wouldn't be very happy.
Help!
But I was talking about a line a moment ago. Watch how high these drivers are entering into the turns, going into the turn itself on the high side, and they're on the high side on the exit then too. Tony Kanaan just going on the low side now, fast in traffic. The most important thing as we watch backwards here, will he lose time as he's following the car in front in dirty traffic? Just up very high on the exit. Jack Root, you have more on Tony Kanaan?
Yeah, Marty, the first of the AGR cars that has been adding wing, that is finding that it's beginning to pay off. I just checked with his Tony Kanaan's crew. They like their car now. It has settled down. It's got some grip, and they say that he can go back to racing. So let's see if there's more wing adjustments made with the other AGR cars. I don't think Marco Andretti needs any more wing, do you?
Not right now. Marco flying 208 and change. His lead is almost a full second over Scott Dixon. Dan Weldon has fought his way back to third. Elio Castroneves is fourth. Tony Kanaan rounds out your top five here at Homestead, Miami. Back here at Homestead Miami Speedway, we have reached the halfway point. If you're just tuning in, we're working lap 101 of 200, the season opener of the IndyCar Series. And you're looking at 21-year-old Marco Andretti as he is out in front by 1.8 seconds over Scott Dixon. Dan Weldon, Tony Kanaan, Elio Castroneves rounds out your top five. We've had 4 different leaders with 4 lead changes. And if you're just joining us, I'm Marty Reed, along with Scott Goodyear, Jack Harut, Brian Pettigo, and Vince Welch. We're so glad you're with us for this season opener of 2008. Let's get an update on Marco Andretti. Jack Harut, you're up.
From the time Marco Andretti came to this racetrack on Thursday afternoon for a PR function, a smile has been on this youngster's face. As I told you at the top of the show, why? Because the sophomore jinx is gone. He's a third-year driver. He started out patiently. The car had a slight bit of understeer. They added front wing, and now the rocket is riding Marco Andretti right into his first lead ever here at Homestead Miami Speedway in his third race. Directly behind him is Scott Dixon, who led most of the early going. But Dixon had a moment out on the racetrack, and that gave his crew pause and told him to be a bit conservative. Meanwhile, in the third spot is his teammate who had to battle from all the way in the back after the car stepped out during qualifying. And that, of course, is Dan Weldon. Weldon now is moving his way up to solidly be behind his teammate Scott Dixon. Tony Kanaan, who was a little racy early on, found himself now in the 4th position. They feel like they made a wing adjustment, and now TK likes his 7-Eleven ride, Brianne.
Leo Castroneves, currently in the 5th position, was just told by his strategist Tim Cindric to play with his adjustment bars if it would help him to race a little bit lower on the track. Elio replied, "It's stuck." And that's the problem they're dealing with right now. His teammate, Ryan Briscoe, just behind him in position number 6, is very happy with this car. One of the signs of a happy driver is that he's quiet in the cockpit, and Ryan has not said a word to race strategist Roger Penske since he pitted on lap 21. Vince?
Ryan Hunter-Reay for Ray Hall Letterman Racing is running in 7th, but he's at the tail end of the lead lap. And Scott Rimke, who's handling his strategy, is on the radio to Ryan, encouraging him to get with it. He said only 12.6 back to the leader. They know they're in threat of being lapped, and they don't want to lose this lead lap. Jack Harut.
And Danica Patrick, who started on the outside of the front row and faded quickly with severe understeer on her car, soldiers on. Down on the inside, that blue and black car, you see her there. They've made wing adjustments. The car started to step out and get loose when the Firestone tires began to run their cycle. Now she's working hard against Vitor Mira in the National Guard car. She seems, guys, to like down low more than up high.
She better get up on the pony because she's in jeopardy of going a lap down. She's the last car on the lead lap. 9th is AJ Foyt, the 4th. Vitor Mira is 10th. They're both a lap down. Ed Carpenter is 11th. He is 2 laps down. While all this is going on, a familiar face to a lot of open wheel fans is now one of the co-owners of one of our teams, Jimmy Vasser's with Vince Welch.
His driver is Oriol Servia, and currently Servia is running in 13th, but a couple of laps down. Jimmy, what's been the assessment of the way it's gone so far?
I don't know. It's hard to hear, but it's about what we expected. You know, we're really behind on the ovals. So far, so good. We just wanted to roll it in the trailer when we get done with this, but you know, it's going to be a long night.
Marty.
Well, he has nothing to be ashamed of. Oriol is in 12th place right now. He's running very solid laps and doing exactly what the team wanted him to do.
You know, when we spoke to him earlier in the week when they had the 2 test days here for those Champ Car World Series teams that were transitioning into the Indy Racing League, he seemed very confident, had a good grasp of what was going on, and he actually seemed like he was enjoying it. There was some drivers we spoke to when they're getting out of their cars, their eyes were as big as saucers. They were just like going, I can't believe the banking, the walls, the speed. It's just going to take a lot of these drivers here to be able to understand how to race on ovals. Remember, the Indy Racing League guys have been around here for many years, have the experience. It's not going to happen overnight, but I wouldn't discount them by the time we get to Indianapolis.
Servia in his 126th start in open wheel competition. There you see the stats on the 33-year-old. As we are getting ready for our next round of pit stops, and if you remember the history of Homestead Miami Speedway, green flag pit stops can be trouble. Every year we seem to have a problem. In 05 it was Scott Dixon. In 2006 it was Tony Kanaan. And last year it was Danica Patrick. So you don't want to miss the next round of pit stops. They're coming up here at Homestead Miami Speedway. We're about 4 laps until he comes in for his stop.
And the problem with those pit stops, Marty, is that the incoming lane, the flat lane we just saw on the right-hand side, has no banking to it whatsoever. So when you're trying to come in and make up time underneath a green pit stop, it's sandy here, it's dirty. And like I said, flat, no banking, no grip. And if you make just a slight mistake of going a bit too quick, the car gets away from you, and then you're a passenger.
And Scott, 3 seconds behind our race leader. We should point out that Dan Weldon has gotten around his teammate, Scott Dixon. So Weldon, who started all the way back in the back of this field, is now moved up to 2nd place. Here it is on replay.
He's going to look on the high side. The number 9 left-hand side is Dixon's car. Now, Dan Weldon's going to have to contend with some traffic that's just up in front of him, but he seems to be able to drive around the cars and accept the dirty air from the cars in front, and it does not seem to affect the handling of his race car.
There is Dan, started 22nd. It's taken him 115 laps, but here he is in 2nd place, and he's looking for his 4th straight win at this racetrack. If he does it, they ought to just rename the place Weldon Raceway.
You know, 115, 16 laps, that's a lot of patience for Dan Weldon. He probably wanted to get it done in about 50, but it's the lap at the end that really counts. And the way that this is looking right now, after these next set of pit stops, he makes a few more changes to his race car, and I bet you he's just going to continue marching forward. Now, certainly Marco Andretti knows how fast Dan Weldon is because they're going to be telling him that on his radio. And I was just seeing in the last couple of laps that Marco started to step up his speed a little bit, but Dan Weldon just went past the stripe and turned 208 miles an hour to Marco Andretti's 206.
You want to know how dominant Dan has been here? Well, he led 179 laps last year and has 359 total. That's more than double 2nd place, Elio Castroneves. The margin as they come by the stripe, 2.8 seconds the last time. Scott Dixon has now fallen 5 seconds behind the race leader. And here comes Marco Andretti on lap 118 of 200. This will not be enough to get him to the finish. So we have at least one more round of pit stops. And remember what we showed you. Pit lane can be treacherous here. And here is your new race leader, Dan Weldon. So as he enters pit lane, let's send it down to Jackaroo.
Marco Andretti and his team had hoped to maybe squeeze 1 or 2 more laps out, but all of a sudden they began to see on the dash that he was going to run out of fuel, so they pitted 1 lap early. Andretti will come onto pit road. They will put a half turn of front wing in the car. A little bit of a frustration on the part of Marco. He gets that half turn. Meanwhile, Tony Kanaan is pulled onto pit road, and his crew goes to work. So far, they have not made any front wing adjustments since the last pit stop. It's just 4 Firestone tires and a full tank of ethanol for TK.
Also coming in, several other cars. Oriole Serbia, Danica Patrick is in, and she peeled off at 8th. Dan Weldon is your race leader right now as he stays out. There is Ryan Briscoe as he is into pit lane. Brienne?
Ryan Briscoe pulling in. They expect no changes on the number 6. Matt Johnson, the chief mechanic, cool, calm, and collected as the 6 gets out nice and clean, guys.
Scott Dixon is also peeled off, making his way down towards the far end of the pit lane as he makes a stop. Jack Arute is there.
Remember now, Scott Dixon did not make any changes the last pit stop. They played it conservative, though, after he had a big wiggle. Let's watch the front nose of the car and see if there is any change. No change there. And Scott Dixon is off and away. And, guys, no discernible change there. Meanwhile, Dan Weldon, his crew is set up, ready to be serviced here. Weldon will pull on the pit road. This is the guy that has made the longest run. 35 gallons of ethanol. The 4 tires going on. The clock beginning to tick away. Remember, it's a football field. Every second they pit on pit road. Weldon drops the hammer in heavy traffic. He'll go out to speed at 2:13. Let's go to Brianne.
Elio Castroneves just pulling out of his tape stall, took 4 Firestone tires and filled back up with fuel. They are playing with fuel mixtures and it's playing off well right now. He's in second position.
So with the second round of green flag pit stops now completed for all the race leaders, that is the man back up front. Marco Andretti will resume out in front of this field. We have 8 total cars on the lead lap right now as we work lap 123 up 200 here at Homestead Miami Speedway. The margin is about a second and a half. And now we check in with Danica Patrick, and as we said, she went in 8th place. She came out in 8th place, but we're getting word that there was a bit of a problem on pit lane.
Now watch the fueler. There's a fueler's on the right-hand side here. He'll get the count of when to come out, and the fueler could not get the probe out, which actually slowed up Danica. Now she was maybe even looking in the mirror because she usually gets a signal coming from the radio and telling them no, when it's time to head off, and that could have been very close because that fueler had not been able to get that probe out. It would have turned around and dragged that thing down pit lane, Marty.
Yeah, it could have dragged him along, too. He could have gone for a ride he didn't want to take. Let's go back up front. There is your race leader, Marco Andretti. He has not had a lot of success in his prior 2 trips here to Homestead Miami, but right now he's out front. Back here at Homestead Miami Speedway, we are under our second caution. You're looking at Milka Duno in the number 23 Dreyer Reinbold Sitco Racing Dallara as she and Ryan Briscoe got together in turn 2. And
we just saw the steering wheel be put out of the cockpit on the right-hand side for Ryan Briscoe, so you know that he's moving inside the cockpit.
Roger Penske. Let's go back, take another look.
So 23 of Milka Duno has lost it, and you know something? 6 of Ryan Briscoe is just collected as her car starts to move up the racetrack. And unfortunately for Ryan Briscoe, his day is done also. We talked about Sam Hornish Jr. debuting here for Penske and winning in his very first attempt for Penske Racing. The first time a debuting driver had won in a race like that in the 40-year history of Penske Racing, but it will not happen for him here today.
And both drivers are out of the car and appear to be A-OK. Brienne has caught up with Roger Penske.
That's right, guys. Roger, it was an impressive run there for a while for Ryan. Explain your impressions of your driver out there.
I think he did a great job. We were just trying to get a good race in here. It's unfortunate we were passing another car and they spun ahead of us and knocked us into the wall. But I think he did a good job first time. It's unfortunate we don't bring her home, though. But good racing out there. A lot of cars, a lot of inexperience. But people are going to learn. I think we'll be in good shape when we get to the next race.
We'll see you in St. Pete.
Thank you.
Well, and Roger still has one more chance to win this race because he's had good luck at season openers this year. Of course, Ryan Newman won the Daytona 500 for him, giving his first 500 victory there. Then the ALMS team won at Sebring, season opener there for that series. So, Elio Castroneves, no pressure, buddy.
I know, and you know the thing that I was amazed at, it was the first victory for Roger Penske at the Daytona 500. With a history of that team and all the victories that they have and all types of different racing, I would not have thought that. I would have lost the question on that one.
Pit road is still closed, so we're going to go side by side again as you see Ryan Briscoe making the long walk. And he did have a good run going, but it's over now. We continue under our second caution here at Homestead Miami Speedway as a result of a 2-car crash. Milka Duno losing control in turn 2 and collecting Ryan Briscoe, and that's what's left to the Team Penske machine as it's on the hook and heading back to the garage area. Marco Andretti, of course, in front right now, working lap 131 of 200. Let's take a look at our Firestone lap leaders, and Scott Dixon still has led the most laps at 63, but Marco is closing in at 54. Tony Kanaan and Dan Weldon 8 and 6 respectively.
Remarkable, it's only our second caution, because we actually thought that we would see a lot more cautions with a lot of the newcomers here tonight, Marty, but it's been a very clean race.
It absolutely has. In fact, the fewest cautions in this race, 3. It's happened 5 times, including last year. And as we said, we're working our second caution here on now lap 132. While they continue the cleanup, that'll give us another chance to step aside. You still won't miss a thing here from Homestead, Miami. Back here at Homestead Miami Speedway, 5 cars now on the lead lap, and Danica Patrick is not one of them, as she is shown in 6th place. She just got lapped before that second caution flag came out, and it looks like Elio Castroneves, who is in 5th place, is going to be coming into pit lane. So, Jack Arute, let's send it your way.
Some calculated gambles by the cars that have come onto pit road. A calculated gamble that will not be taken, though, by Marco Andretti. They wanted to make some major changes to make the car faster. He said, no, I want to leave it just the way it is, simply because it's so good in traffic. Brienne?
Elio Castroneves pulling into his pit stall. Don't expect these tires to be replaced. It's a bit of a ruse on Team Penske. Only fuel was put into the car. Elio's exact words were, let's just put fuel in and pray.
Boy, I don't know if they can go that far. We're working lap 134, and it seems like everybody made about 50 laps. That would put in 180 for it. And if I still know my math, that's not 200.
Well, I'm sure what they're looking at, they were Elio was the last car on the lead lap, so maybe they're hoping for a few more yellow caution periods, and they're working for track position for the last 20 laps of the race. But you still have to have a fast enough car, because the quick cars will find their way to the front. But it's all going to come down just to strategy and where the yellows fall, if they do.
Well, Vince Welch is caught up with Ryan Briscoe. Vince?
Ryan, how was the car up to that point, and what was the incident like to your perspective?
Such a shame. You know, I was having such a great race. Everything was going exactly as we set out to do, and we were making some really good pit stops, good in and out laps, and the car was really solid right to the end of our stint. So, you know, I was just taking my time out there and working my way through traffic, and made some good passes out there. It was just going perfectly. You know, it's a shame. I mean, the drivers are doing a great job. They're really sticking to their line, making it easy for us to make decisions as we go by them. And really, I've got no complaints.
Thank you, Ryan. Marty?
All right, and there is his teammate Elio Castroneves, as he is, as we said, the last car on the lead lap, but he'll be back at the end of the line. And there is Roger Penske, hoping that he can bring home the win for the team, but he's going to have to work some strategy, because the longest stint has been 53 laps. That was turned in by Dan Weldon. And there is Scott Dixon. Dixon is in 3rd right now, and let's get more from Jack Arute.
One of the things I talked to Scott Dixon during this break about was where is the best place to attack Marco Andretti. And you can be assured, too, that Dan Weldon was listening in as well. They feel like Andretti may be suspect on the high side. Marco, as we said, they wanted him to maybe make a change. He waved it off and said, no, the car's too comfortable. Let me update you on Marco's pit friend right in front of him. That, of course, Danica Patrick. I asked Michael Andretti, why did you bring Danica in? He said, our strategy when you're a lap down is always go the opposite of the decision made by the leader. Never heard it put that way, but it makes sense, guys.
Actually, that's good, Con. I've never heard it put that way either in all my years of motorsports. So I guess you take a chance at it and maybe hope for the best on it, because if she has more fuel in, maybe she can actually catch a yellow and stay out where the other ones have to come in and pit. So we'll have to see if that strategy plays out well for them.
Well, while we've got a moment, let's talk about our GoDaddy.com trivia question. And here it is. Who won the first open-wheel oval race at Homestead Miami Speedway? The clock is ticking. Da, da, da. I can't do that. That's
no,
terrible.
It wasn't good, but I can tell you I now know the answer, because you're holding that card up in front of me.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's your answer. Jimmy Vasser back in 1996. And, of course, Jimmy, now part of KV Racing. And, you know, as you see, that's his car right there. Oriole Survey is still out there. You want to know the first race ever held in the Miami area? Back in 1926, it was in Fulford, a 1 1/4 mile board track. Peter DiPaolo won in Duesenberg. He covered 300 miles at an average speed of 129 miles an hour. And, you know, the margin of victory was so close. It was a minute and a half.
A board track. Can you imagine racing on that? Oh, my goodness.
All right, let's reset this field for you because we have 5 cars on the lead lap. Marco Andretti is first. Dan Weldon is second. Scott Dixon third. Tony Kanaan fourth. Elio Castroneves rounds out your top 5, and that's the only 5 on the lead lap. Then it's Ryan Hunter-Reay, AJ Foyt, Danica Patrick, Ed Carpenter, and Vitor Meira. That is your top 10. Well, and as we take a look at Dan Weldon's, we work our way back because you have some lap vehicles between Marco and Dan. It's not been a great weekend for Dan, at least when it came to qualifying.
That's when the car is loose. He talked about that before. The back end just swings around and goes up towards the wall. Unfortunately, he had some good luck here in the race, though. Obviously, a great handling race car. You hear the spotters up in his ear right there, letting him know where to go. It's a team effort to get yourself to the front. And now he just has to continue to have patience here and find a way around Marco Andretti.
Well, he started 22nd, and you notice the furthest back a Homestead winner has ever started. That was 12th. His teammate, Scott Dixon, did it in 2003. His deepest penetration was from 11th all the way to first back in 05.
Now remember, these guys did not come in this yellow that we're having right now, so there's no changes on the race car. One thing they do get to use here on the restart is the new paddle shifts, which have been implemented into the Indy Racing League cars here this year. So that no longer a stick shift inside the car itself. As we see Danica Patrick starting to come in the pit lane, probably just to top off before the yellow goes away.
And not a bad decision because now we're working lap 139, so that means we have about 61 laps to go. And if we continue to run under yellow, we might get into the window. Bree?
Danica came in just to top off on fuel, guys. It was a very quick stop, playing into the strategy Michael Andretti talked about. Marty Scott?
All right, thank you for the update. And we'll have 1 to go at the line this time. So we'll get back to green flag racing on about lap 140. Now, in the middle, if you see him, is that's TJ. That's his dad in the silhouette of Danica's father. He doesn't stick in pit lane anymore. He gets too nervous. He gets too excited. And you ought to see him. He gets it real animated out there, even that far out. He's out in turn number 2. So there is his daughter. 26 years old. You know, she just had her birthday earlier this week, and he was kidding her, and she says, "Stop it, I'm getting old." And he goes, "Old?" He says, "I can't even remember 26.
Now you see her left hand was actually turning a knob on the steering. Watch her right there, turning it back to full green fuel, so 100% fuel for the restart, and she will get directions from the team if they want her to lean the engine out.
You can see that they're cranking up the wick as we're getting ready to go back to green flag racing. Danica trying to get caught back up to the pack. They're into turn number 3. Marco Andretti, he won't hesitate. He'll get on the hammer early. Coming out of 4, we're back to green flag racing here at Homestead Miami Speedway, lap 142 of 200. Dixon side by side with Tony Kanaan. That is a battle for third. Kanaan's going to take the position. So Dixon, the last 2 times we've gone back to green flag racing, that's when he's had his biggest problem.
We talked about that. Sometimes the car does not work well for you after a restart. You have to wait for the tire pressures to come up, and look at this, starting to punch in there for 3 or 4 wide, but Danica takes a low line and gets around all the traffic and continues marching forward.
Danica shown in 8th position right now. Remember, she is 1 lap down, as is AJ Foyt the 4th and Ryan Hunter-Reay. She's got a lot of work to do. Going to need at least another caution and a lot of other things to fall in her way to get back on the lead lap. Meanwhile, Marco Andretti has opened up a 1.2 second lead over 2nd place Dan Weldon.
And he just ran a lap of 209 miles an hour. Dan Weldon 208.5. So it looks like Marco Andretti maybe has some speed in hand over Dan Weldon right now.
Then you see Tony Kanaan and Scott Dixon with lap vehicles in between.
That's Ryan Hunter-Reay in the ethanol machine that was directly behind Marco on the restart.
Dixon on the high side. That's Ryan Hunter-Reay underneath. On
Ryan
board.
Hunter-Reay's not making it very easy for him, that's for sure.
Well, Ryan is the first car on a lap down. And there is no NASCAR lucky dog, so I guarantee you that Scott Dixon's not real happy with Ryan.
Say in this business, Marty, what goes around comes around. I'm not saying he's doing any blocking. He just wants to run as hard as he possibly can. But now his car moves up the racetrack, allowing Dixon to get underneath, but he just walks up the racetrack, almost slides into the back of him.
Try this again.
This is when Dixon's talking to himself. Come on, buddy, just give me a bit of space. You see, we talked about how the cars are sliding up here this year, using all the road. Ryan Hunter-Reay looks to go back on the inside. But Dixon certainly has a little bit more speed now. His goal is to try and chase down directly what's in front of him, which is Tony Kanaan.
Yeah, Dixon's about 2 miles an hour faster on that last lap, and now he's starting to finally open up some space. So that'll allow him to go back into the chase for third place Tony Kanaan. He's got to make up about a half a second to get there. Meanwhile, up front, Marco Andretti has got 1.1 second lead over Dan Weldon. That is a lap vehicle that he is going around right now.
And Ernesto Vizo, which is car number 33, which he actually got around pretty easily, and that's exactly what you want when you're leading the race itself. You hope that the driver in front sees you, and there again, the spotters up on top of the stands. So watch Michael Andretti watching his cars go around. The spotters up on top of the stands will tell those drivers, the fast cars coming from behind, keep your line.
All right, next lap by, 50 to go. That means we're in the window for the stop. So anytime a yellow comes out, or anybody who wants to try and play some early strategy, although I don't think anybody will leave the track right now as long as we're staying mean and green.
Well, for Marco Andretti, he does not want to see a yellow because he has a fast race car. Seems to be able to get through traffic pretty easily, although Andretti and Weldon right now are certainly running the same speeds, both 209 miles an hour on that last lap. Jackaroo?
Scott, one of the reasons why that speed may be precisely the same is Dan Weldon was just given the green light to go to fuel position 1. Full rich to be able to drop the hammer, as they say. They felt that Marco Andretti was getting away, so forget about trying to make fuel. They are anticipating that both the leader and this guy, Dan Weldon, will have to make one final stop. I think whoever goes with an ethanol and go and no tires will probably end up being the winner, unless, of course, we have a caution.
And Scott, we should explain what's going on as we watch TK, Tony Kanaan, and Scott Dixon going back to being able to have adjustable fuel mixtures, which is different from last year.
Last year, it was either a green position on the fuel knob on the steering wheel for the drivers, or if you went to a yellow position when you were running behind the pace car. Things are different now. Those same positions are there, green and yellow, but there's 3 other positions to lean the engine out. That gives you a little less fuel, a little less horsepower, a little less speed, which sounds like what Dan Weldon was doing as watch this great battle between Tony Kanaan now, number 11, and Scott Dixon. Remember, Kanaan rubbed wheels earlier on with a 3-car of Helio Castroneves, and they got away with that.
Side by side at over 208 miles an hour, about 3 inches apart from time to time. You say you want to try this? Bring your A game. Kanaan holds him off. That is Dan Weldon right in front, as those 3 are now pretty much in lockstep, and they're only 3/4 of a second behind Marco Andretti. There's your top 4 as 47 laps to go. This race is really starting to develop as 4 key players are in the mix. And with 5th place, Helio Castroneves, he's going to have to reel up about another 6 seconds to get in and make this a 5-car battle. Right now, it is still Marco Andretti out in front. We're heading for the home stretch. You're going to go side by side. You will not miss a thing. Welcome back to the XM Indy 300 here at Homestead, Miami. As we are working with 42 laps to go, you're looking at the battle for 2nd place. Tony Kanaan has gotten around Dan Weldon all of a sudden. Kanaan's car's found a little bit of life.
He's turned 211 miles an hour that last lap, so this longer run is certainly making his car work better for him. But don't forget that we still have one more fuel stop for all these leaders before the end of the race.
coming up on some slower traffic. That's your top 4. Let's go back and show you the pass again. Tony goes down low in the 7-Eleven machine.
And Tony had been working the high line just about all race long and just did a great surprise move to make the move underneath the cars, and that's sometimes what you have to do. Now he's setting his sights. And Marco Andretti chooses the wrong side. He thought he'd go around the high side and didn't get the job done. Had to get out of the throttle, and Tony Kanaan takes the lead.
That was the 19 of Mario Moraes, and Moraes is several laps down, just trying to stay out of everybody's way, but was unable to do it there. I'm sure Marco is not real thrilled right now, but Mario doing his best he can. You got to remember, this kid had never been on an oval, never raced at night, never had been over 200 miles an hour until he came here this week.
And that's a tall order. He's doing a great job, and he really did the right thing because he left the high line, or left the low line rather, and stayed high to give the cars all the room in the bottom. But Marco's been running his car on the top, so he just didn't think to go there.
Okay, we mentioned that Scott Dixon doesn't seem to have a good car early in the run, but here we get a few more laps in. He's putting pressure back on his teammate Dan Weldon for third.
Well, it's going to be interesting. It looks to me when we go on board with him that his car is understeering. He seems to turn a lot on the steering wheel right now. And you see how a car comes up towards the wall on the exit of the turn. And that's because it's pushing all the way up there on the exit of the corner itself. And he doesn't want to take his foot off the gas because he'll slow himself up. But he runs high on the entrance, down to the middle of the turn, and uses all the road on the exit. So I'm going to say his car is not working very well for him right now.
That one little bobble gave Tony Kanaan now a 3/4 of a second lead over Marco Andretti, Dan Weldon, and Scott Dixon. Right now, Helio Castroneves is not a factor in 5th. He is 11 seconds back. Let's get more on Tony Kanaan.
As you watch his wife Danny, who gave birth to his baby boy Lorenzo over the offseason, Tony Kanaan should be pitting in approximately 9 more laps. They don't anticipate making any major changes, guys. When they added the front wing to that car, that seemed to be the difference. Or was it when he collided with Helio Castroneves? Because since then, this car's been on fire.
Well, he certainly is very, very much an involved dad. If you know anything about Tony's history, he lost his father when he was very young, and he cherishes every moment with young Leo as with 35 laps to go. In fact, we had a chance to talk to him about being a dad.
It made me a better person, I would say, outside racing. It made me not think about racing 24 hours a day. When I get home, I can switch off and actually worry about him. But once I'm here, I'm all about racing.
And he is racing very well, thank you very much. In first place right now in front of his teammate Marco Andretti. Then it's the Targa Ganassi squad of Dan Weldon and Scott Dixon. And Helio Castroneves is falling further back. Take a look. You can see that Tony, last season on the 1.5 mile ovals, he won at Japan and Kentucky. Jack?
So, Marty, what was the best gift that Leo got as a baby gift? It was from teammate Danica Patrick. She had delivered in TK's team colors a full-blown go-kart. That go-kart is not a go-kart that you would give to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. We're talking about a go-kart that can go 100 miles an hour. Earlier today, I saw TK, Danny, and the baby was crying. And he said, well, we just signed a long-term contract with AGR, and like his dad, he's whining about it.
Great story. I want to see how long it'll be before Leo's in that go-kart, though. That'll be interesting. All right, there is Danny, as she is very interested in this. It's Tony Kanaan trying to lock down a win here. Remember, this is his adopted hometown here in the Miami area. Of course, the Brazilian, with only 31 laps to go, trying to put the icing on this cake. Had to spend a few dollars to buy tickets for all the family and friends that were coming to the race.
Maybe that's why he's driving so hard right now, so he can go pay that bill.
Well, and his best here at Homestead Miami was 3rd back in 05, and he was 5th last year. So a chance to take home the trophy, the first place points, and all the money that goes with it. And we're waiting for what will happen as far as the next round, the final round of pit stops. When and who will blink first? And all of a sudden, take a look at all this lap traffic. as that's Darren Manning down low in the 14 car. Oriole Server, let's go 3 wide. Hold your breath as we go into the corner. Everybody's okay.
Now both those drivers that he was ready to come around would know that he was coming up quickly behind him because of the spotters that we spoke about before. But when Tony Kanaan sees 2 cars wide in front of him, he says, come on guys, just give me a little bit of space. But they're racing for position, so they don't want to get off the throttle and make too much room for him.
That's Ernesto Vizo in the 33 right in front of Tony. He'll go underneath and get around cleanly. Take a look at the battle for second as they are now in that same lap traffic as that is Darren Manning down low in the red, white, and blue 14 AJ Foyt entry. And here comes the 10 car of Dan Weldon. And Tony Kanaan is going to be the first to blink. He has pulled off and is heading for pit lane with 27 laps to go this time by. So Marco Andretti will retake the lead. Weldon and Dixon will move up to second and third. And boy, this is the slowest moment of your racing day as he's coming your way, Jackaroot.
You know, in the basketball tournament, the star players like to be at the free throw line to sink the game winner or the three-pointer. Well, for this crew, for Tony Kanaan, they want to deliver the game winner with a flawless pit stop. The clock is ticking, 35 gallons of ethanol flowing into the car. They are off and away. I believe that they short fuel, guys. They didn't take the full load. They don't need it.
That's right. Only 26 laps to go, so every second counts. Meanwhile, out on the track, there are your 3 leaders. Who's next to blink? It looks like Marco Andretti is going to come in. So Marco will relinquish the lead over to Dan Weldon. Remember, we talk about the treacherous pit in here, and everybody's been told about it over and over. Marco makes a clean entry into pit lane. Meanwhile, there is Dan Weldon trying to get around Ernesto Vizo. So let's check in with Brianne Pettigo.
A crowd of people have gathered around to watch the pit stop of Marco Andretti. No expected changes on this car, just fuel and tires. His birthday, his 21st birthday was last week, so it would be a wonderful birthday present for Marco Andretti to take home the win tonight. And he's away, clean.
8 seconds seems like an eternity. Meanwhile, Dan Weldon stays out. The word we're hearing, yes, Scott Dixon has now pulled on to pit lane with 24 laps to go. Jack?
After going 213 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour seems like a crawl, but the driver must hit the marks exactly. He does. Plenty of room to put the fuel in, add the tires. Again, look for a short fuel. That's exactly what they do. Scott Dixon is off and away. His final stop is in the books.
And we hear that the 10 camp has laid out their equipment for their final pit stop, but Dan Weldon right now trying to lay down a good hot lap or 2, but he'll peel off at this point after going 2:08 and change the last circuit. That means Elio Castroneves will cycle into the race lead. And we are at a blistering pace here with only 2 cautions, 173 mile an hour average, including our 2 yellows. And so a chance to actually catch your breath here as you come down pit lane. And hopefully nobody makes a mistake. There's your new race leader as he has got Marco Andretti right behind him. Let's go to Jack.
Dan Weldon came from the back of the field, promised his crew that he would pay them back for their hard work with a run to the front. He did just that. Now they're paying him back with an opportunity to take the fuel and the tires in the shortest amount of time. Did he do it, guys?
Well, we'll have to wait and see on where he comes out with the rest of the lead. Marco Andretti going by Elio Castroneves, but you got to remember, Elio is a full lap ahead of everybody, so he is still the race leader until he pits. We're going to go side by side. This will be our last break before we take you to the checkered flag. Whoop. Well, now we're being told that we may stay because he may be pitting this lap. Waiting for the word to find out. They are laid out. So with Elio still in control until he makes his final stop. Also still out there, remember, is Danica Patrick. Remember, she topped off, so she can go a few more laps. Meanwhile, here comes Elio Castroneves into pit lane. Showing right now, Tony Kanaan has gotten around Danica Patrick, according to official scoring, so we'll double check. And here is Elio's stop. Let's go to Vince Welch.
They talked about bringing Elio in at lap 185, but they decided to go ahead and bring him in a little bit earlier. Tim Cindric talking him into his stop. They're going to go with the 4 tires and the fuel. They'd even had some consideration about just splashing the fuel at the end. Time stop, and off he goes with 4 fresh Firestones.
All right, so he relinquishes the lead. We'll see where he comes out after the cycle. We can tell you that Tony Kanaan is the race leader. Danica Patrick now is in second place. Remember, she's pitted a lot later than these guys the last time around during that yellow, so she can go a little longer on this run. We're going side by side. We're going over 200 miles an hour. Take a look at our motorsports calendar coming up next here. The NHRA Powerade Spring Nationals qualifying. They'll be going over 300 miles an hour on ESPN2 and ESPN2 HD. And then, of course, finals coverage Sunday, 4:30 Eastern on ESPN2 and ESPN2 HD. All right, Danica Patrick is making her final pit stop. That means Tony Kanaan has a little more breathing room. Let's go to Brienne Pettigo.
Danica's pulling into her pit box as we speak, changing the 4 Firestone tires, filling up with fuel, trying to get her back out as quickly as possible, keep her on that lead lap. Took a little bit longer than we expected.
So as she peels back out of pit lane, coming back out onto the racetrack, we can tell you Tony Kanaan's lead over now second place Scott Dixon, 2.7 seconds. Marco Andretti is third. He's about 4 seconds behind the leader. Dan Weldon is in fourth. Elio Castroneves is in fifth. There you get an idea of the margin back to Marco Andretti. And then we'll show on back. There goes Dan Weldon. Elio Castroneves is a lot further back. He's all the way on the front straightaway, so not going to be a player in the finish here unless we get a yellow that tightens up this field. Only 12 laps remaining. Tony Kanaan, you see there, he's led 26 of the 187 laps.
With the pace that Tony Kanaan is setting right now, he is in jeopardy, or Elio Castroneves is in jeopardy. I've seen Tony Kanaan come up into his mirrors very shortly. The pace of Tony really surprises me because he expected a lot out of qualifying. The car was a little slower, he said, getting ready for the race, making some changes. He sat back and probably just made some changes during the pit stops to get his car better towards the end of the race, Marty, because he didn't seem to really that strong as maybe some of the other drivers like Dixon at the very beginning of this race. But give it to him to work with the team, make some changes. A very smart race driver. So, you know, he's got a lot on his plate this year with the departure of Dario Franchitti. So he really now has to work on the setups much by himself and really work with a couple of other drivers that don't really have as much experience as Dario did.
That's true. He is the veteran at age 33. There is Scott Dixon, now 2.1 seconds behind. Dixon, of course, has led 63 laps tonight. Marco Andretti's actually led the most. He's back in third place, 85 laps up front for the 21-year-old. And as we showed you just a moment ago, Tony Kanaan now has led 30 laps. Marco is probably still wondering what he could have done differently on that lap traffic situation that he had a little earlier, but right now he's just going to find some horsepower. And he actually had the fastest lap last time by, 210 of our top 3 cars. 8 laps, 7 time to go this next time by, and again, there is Marco. He's going to have some lap traffic to work through.
You know, on that pass with Marco, he was doing the right thing because he's been running the tall line up high as we have the yellow.
And we got a car up into the wall right there. You see, it's the 33 of Ernesto Vizo. So Vizo, and it looks like Tony Kanaan was swept up in this as well. Our race leader, Tony Kanaan, is not going to win tonight in front of his adopted hometown fans of Miami.
But I'll tell you what's going to happen here. It will be a shootout when we come down to it now. There again, we talk about the traffic up. He's spun in front of him. TK is just collected, much as we saw before with Milko Duno collecting the 6 of Ryan Briscoe. And Tony had nowhere to go, guys, and did a great job not to really center punch.
There's his wife looking on, and there's Vizo. climbing out of the car. And that is what is left of Tony Kanaan's right front. Let's check in with Jack Arute.
Guys, George Klotz just asked his driver, can you stay out? He said, if it's under caution. They're continuing to limp around, and he says, stay out as long as you can. I was impressed, though, how calm Tony Kanaan was in the conversation back with his tactician. If I had a close encounter like that, I'd have been stuttering.
Well, we knew that this was a possibility. I mean, we had all talked about it. Everybody had talked about it. And unfortunately, it had happened here that involved the race leader. And I'm sure no one feels worse than Ernesto Vizo. I mean, he wasn't trying to turn lap record times. He was just trying to do his best he could in his first start here in the IndyCar Series. But the end result is, if this goes back to green flag racing, there's no way TK can win. Of course, Scott Dixon saying, quick, get it cleaned up, because we want to go back green so that I can pass and make the win. Let's get more from Vince Welch.
Mike Hull just came over the radio to Scott Dixon and said, don't get too close to Tony Kanaan. Kanaan has suspension problems. We don't want a piece to fall off and damage your car. So Scott Dixon will keep a little bit of distance between himself and Tony Kanaan here as they run under yellow. As you take a look at Mike Hull communicating with his driver, Scott Dixon just told him you've got 5 to go.
When that 5 to go, when we come for the restart, when Tony Kanaan will peel off and come into the pit lane, and Scott Dixon will lead, he'll have 2 lap cars between himself and the then second place driver, which will be Marco Andretti.
Jack, you've got more?
Yeah, Marty, you may wonder, why were they allowing Tony Kanaan to stay out there with a wounded race car? Well, Brian Barnhart made the call from topside. He said, look, if Tony can keep up the speed with the pace car, then he can stay out as long as he keeps that speed. Tony Kanaan, to drive home to the point, you notice, will be going to the high side and letting the pace car have a full view of just how he's able to keep up the speed. You see, he's trying to wiggle it. 1 to go at the line, and this is going to be heartbreak time for Tony Kanaan.
Yeah, the Delphi safety crew has gotten the track cleaned up, and we are going to go back to green flag racing. It'll be 4 laps this time, so when we go 1 to go, it'll be 3 laps, and there's no way he can hang on.
Well, he can't, but the reason why you ask we want to stay out in the racetrack, well, he's going to try and stay out there because he's going to try and complete as many laps as possible, so the people that are falling out of the race so far, he can actually finish in front of them, because if he stops now and drops down 5 or 6 laps, it's going to position him further back. He might gain another 2 positions by hanging out as long as he possibly can.
Fellas, Tony Kanaan just radioed to a spotter. Tell the guys behind me to go to the outside if they can. Go to the outside if they can. Let's watch.
Well, they're coming down through turn 2, so they have the whole back straightaway yet to go. All right, let's reset it for you. It's Tony Kanaan up front, at least momentarily. Then it'll be Scott Dixon right there in the number 9. Drop back to the 26 of Marco Andretti in 3rd with 2 lap vehicles in front of him. It's Dan Weldon in the number 10 in 4th. And then Elio Castroneves, the last car on the lead lap. And we are back to green flag racing, and there's your lead change as Tony Kanaan can do nothing but watch as everybody goes by. The 11 will now be black flagged as he cannot maintain race pace. And meanwhile, Scott Dixon, who won here in 2003, look at Kanaan. He is trying to stay out as best he can, but he's going to have to come in. There'll be 2 laps to go this time by. Marco Andretti in 2nd place, Dan Weldon in 3rd. And that is Marco right behind. Is there enough time for him to reel in Scott Dixon? Remember, Dixon has not been all that great when the tires have been cooled off, when he's come back on the restarts, but it's a little bit different situation. They didn't stop, they didn't make the full change, didn't put a full load on.
Well, I can assure you one thing, that the foot is going to be flat on the gas for both those drivers all the way around. There's no traffic in front. We'll have to see if he can actually even get enough closeness to the car in front as a white flag is drawn to even get a draft, but I don't think so, Marty.
1.5 miles to go. Remember the last race last year at Chicago? It was this last lap that cost Scott Dixon the championship. Doesn't look like that's going to be the problem here on the season opener of 2008. Is this a taste of things to come? Well, it's definitely a great night for Marco Andretti. He's never done well at this track, has never finished. But coming out of 4, Scott Dixon with his 11th career win. And 2nd at Homestead, Miami. Andretti in 2nd. Dan Weldon, who was looking for his 4th in a row, will come home in 3rd. Elio Castroneves will finish in 4th. So a great run for Scott Dixon. And I'm sure it doesn't erase the disappointment of last year, but a step in the right direction. There's wife Emma, and there is Tony Kanaan wondering what might have been.
So close to winning this event in his adopted hometown, as you've mentioned before, but he just is never lucky here.
The fireworks in the background, and the celebration begins in the Target Ganassi camp. For Dixon, his 6th career win on an oval. And there's Michael coming down. And there is your race winner. When we come back, we'll talk to our winner in Victory Lane. ESPN's presentation of the XM Indy 300 at Homestead, Miami, brought to you by XM Radio with Indy Racing. Exclusive coverage from the wheels up. By Firestone, the first name in Indy Racing. And by Honda, sole engine supplier for the IndyCar Series. Well, here at Homestead, Miami, we'll be going to drag racing in just a moment. But first, let's talk to our winner in Victory Lane. Vince, it's all yours.
Scott Dixon climbing out of his car after winning the season opener here at Homestead Miami Speedway. And Scott taking congratulations from his team. It certainly didn't look like you were going to be the one celebrating in Victory Lane. What was your reaction when you saw that TK had contact?
Well, we were catching them quick. I think that was the best part about it. It would have been close at the end, but, TK had a great car. We were really struggling on long runs, but the Target guys in the pit stops, man, again, were unstoppable. So, I think Marco and TK probably had a little bit better cars than us today, but we came through with the win, and that's what counts.
It's the season opener, but what kind of boost does this give you guys to open up this way?
Well, this is fantastic. I think this is, 4 in a row now for a Ganassi car at Homestead, and I've won it twice now, Dan 3 times. It's just fantastic. We can't say anything more about, the support we get from Target and all our fans out there, so thank you very much.
Scott Dixon, the winner at Homestead. Marty?
And a very disappointed Tony Kanaan. He will finish in 8th place. You see the results coming across the top of your screen. This was the reaction when he first climbed out of the car with team owner Michael Andretti and everybody consoling him on a great run that just didn't quite make it. Don't forget, next Sunday, April 6th, 2:30 Eastern on ESPN, the Honda Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports. Coming up next, it's the O'Reilly Spring Nationals qualifying from Houston, Texas. Congratulations to Scott Dixon. We will see you next Sunday from St. Petersburg for our entire ESPN crew till we meet again.